I taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.
Hey, welcome to HoopSpeak Live. I'm your host, Beckley Mason. With me today, Ethan Sherwood-Strauss. Zach Harper is out with a cold. Ethan, what's happening, my man?
Nothing much. It's an overcast day in the Bay. I'm sleepy as I always am after a trip to the Oracle Arena, where I stay often till midnight before coming back and then writing more. So how you doing, man?
I'm good. Let's talk about your Warriors. Wasn't so long ago they were a 4th seed maybe, fighting for home court advantage. Now they're fighting to stay in the playoffs. What's been going on?
Well, I would analogize it. It's like the GIF versus GIF. To this, it's kind of like a runner is in a trial run for the Olympics, and he's really far ahead of whatever cut he needs to make, but he's come up lame, and he's going to finish. He's going to finish in time to make the trial, but he's just meat. He's just done. You know, they will make the playoffs. The overwhelming likelihood is that they will make the playoffs because they build up such a cushion and they have so many games at home. I believe it's 16 of the final 22 at home, now 14 of the final 20 at home. So it would be a shock if they lost, but they kind of suck right now. So it's a funny thing. It feels like the success is all in the past, and yet they're still going to have a successful season overall.
Well, you compare them to this runner who's come up lame, but it's not really like injuries have been the problem, right? I mean, they were balling pre-Bogut coming back. He's been out and in and out, but that's not what's going on, right? What if you could pinpoint it, what seems to be that, the reason that they're falling back to earth? Curtis Harris in the comments suggests Jarrett Jack.
That's a factor, but sometimes he plays atrociously, sometimes he plays well. And when he plays atrociously, it's really off. Since he's one of those takeover mode guys, it goes one way or it goes the other way. And he's an incredibly frustrating player because he looks off open teammates. You can see it throughout the game. And on the balance, it works out efficiently. But in his worst moments, it's worse. I'd say it's more that the defense has gotten figured out. They don't have a single big guy who can hedge on pick and roll. So they can't confuse anybody. Everybody knows that they're sinking on that pick and roll because David Lee can't hedge and Andrew Bogut can't hedge, and so teams are just beating them with the skip pass across to open three-pointers, and I don't know how they fix that. I don't know how they get less predictable, combined with how the rookies have not improved over the course of the year. Harrison Barnes is often lost on defense. He's going to be a good defensive player going forward, but it's a lot to ask of him to guard people like Carmelo Anthony and some of the more elite wings on a night-to-night basis. So, I'd say the main diagnosis is that the defense has gotten figured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that seems to be the case. They are giving up a ton of threes, and which is sort of surprising because they do have some length on the wings. But I want to talk about a team that no one has figured out, and that's the San Antonio Spurs. They keep rolling without Tony Parker. A couple weeks ago, there was a lot of buzz. Tony Parker, he's scoring 21 points a game. He's got 7 assists. He's shooting over 50% from the field. This is an MVP candidate. Obviously, he's not, in the top echelon of MVP candidates, but he deserves to be. As they say, hold on, I'm going to give you the phrase. He deserves to be in the conversation.
He's out. This conversation? What is this conversation? That's like I don't understand it. It's like somebody comes up during Obama's presidency. He was like, look, I know you're president, but I deserve to be in the conversation. I deserve to be in the conversation. We just know that Tony Parker is not in that conversation. Yes, they have to have some sort of a ranking of how many MVP votes people get 1 through 5. So maybe if you believe that being top 5 is in the quote unquote conversation, then yeah. But it's too small a sample size without Parker to declare that they're unaffected by his absence. I believe they need him. They have something of a symbiotic relationship. He is he's plugged into that motion weak system, but then again, they can't. There's nobody else on the roster who can run it as effectively as he does. So I'm not the biggest Tony Parker guy. I sound almost like the Skip Baylessian LeBron haters of yore, in that I kind of want him to show me it in the playoffs when the team schemes for him. He's kind of flamed out the last 3 years, but at the same time, you could argue that he's as essential to his team's success as any 5 players in the league, or he's in the top 5 of being essential to his team's success.
Well, the first part, I think what it takes for someone to be in the conversation is for someone to talk about them. That's what I love. Is like yes. Right now, once I say his name in conversation with you, he is in the conversation.
Yeah. Can't get him out.
I think where we're going to see this hurt the Spurs is probably more in their second unit, where now you're getting more Patty Mills minutes, more Corey Joseph minutes. It's not going to be. It's going to be sort of like when Chris Paul went out for the Clippers, and what really happened was the starting unit was still fine, but the second unit fell apart. I could see a similar dynamic working there. But what I think we're seeing without Parker is really interesting. We're getting, some more Thiago Splitter ISOs. Kawhi Leonard got to work a few ISOs against the Bulls, which, you don't get to see. So one thing that is going to happen without Parker is we're going to get to evaluate or have more opportunity to see what these players look like without him running everything for them. And, I think it's going to be a nice little measuring stick, because that's the big question, right? In the playoffs, if someone can slow down Parker, will other players be able to beat people off the dribble? Will that little tic-tac-toe passing inside game stand up to it? So this is an interesting time for the Spurs, even though Parker, who's generally the most fun player to watch, is not there.
Did you just make San Antonio Barcelona? Is that what you did? I didn't know that was totally the analogy there.
No, that's a reference from that terrible hockey movie that Mike Myers plays like a Canadian broadcaster, and they like go up to whatever, Alaska or something. He's like, oh, I don't like this tic-tac-toe hockey so much, but hey, they're playing and it's looking good.
Is that Mystery Alaska with Russell Crowe, or is that a different movie? Am I mixing up my hockey movies?
That's it.
Sweet. It's probably Russell Crowe's best role. It's either that or Gladiator.
Probably. So we're going to talk Rondo after when we get Lee Jenkins on here. He wrote a very cool profile on Rondo for SI. Boston 13-14 without Rondo, so it's not a small stretch, but it is also not a full season. But first, LeBron James hero balling, 16 straight wins, game on the line. He goes right to the rack and gets the bucket. The Heat really just look like they're toying with bad teams at this point.
Yeah, they looked really bored. They probably should have lost this game. The refs were quite kind to Miami, I would say, in those final moments. They gave them a lot of leeway. Miami didn't look like they especially cared. There was a three-pointer by Dwayne Wade when they were down 2, which usually isn't what you want to do in that situation. And the types of long jumpers they were taking just weren't good shots at the end. So I guess, why should they care? They're way ahead of the Knicks. They're not going to give that up. They've already shown that they can win series without home court advantage. The only thing that was really of interest to me in this game was that Michael Jordan talked about how LeBron can't drive when he goes left, and LeBron drove with his left and got a layup. So I'm not sure where you find the weakness that Michael Jordan sees in LeBron James.
Well, yeah, I thought that wasn't. I mean, teams have been trying to force LeBron left for, a decade, and you just can't. I mean, you can, forcing him left is is you have to still be able to cut him off. Like, if you let LeBron go any direction, he's going to be trouble. But I think, Jordan's scouting report is correct. Like, you don't want him getting to his strong hand, but the way that he's finishing with the, kind of the reverse spin with the right hand, everything else, it is he is superlative. Okay, let's get to our guest, Lee Jenkins from SI, friend of the program. We're really excited to have him back on. Lee, you've been hanging out with the Clippers recently. Earlier this season, you saw the Lakers. What's your kind of impression of where those two franchises stand, and kind of can you contrast them, compare them a little?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally different, obviously. For one thing, just from a chemistry point of view, and I never know how overrated or underrated that is, but in the NBA, it seems fairly important. And the Clippers are almost like a sorority with all their little birthday parties and dinners and movie nights and everything they do. And the Lakers are obviously totally the opposite with Kobe and Dwight Howard going back and forth. And with the Lakers, it almost seems like it's Dwight Howard on one side and then everybody else on the other side, which is completely different than the situation Chris Paul had. And obviously those guys, with their free agency, they each could have orchestrated their spot. And it's gone incredibly different, even though they're just a few miles apart. So in those ways, the franchises are different. And then I'm sure what you guys talk about a lot is just how athletically glaring the differences are in terms of depth, in terms of ability to get out and run. I mean, I just don't know what the end game is for the Lakers at this point, because unless Dwight Howard just becomes Dwight Howard again in Orlando, there's so little that they can do moving forward and so few ways that they can become younger, more athletic. They don't have draft picks and they don't have money.
Do you believe that sorority atmosphere, as you characterize it, and I love that you termed it that way, is that because of Chris Paul? Is that because that's the environment that he wants?
Yeah, it is. I think a few guys are like that. Odom helps in that regard. But yeah, this is what Chris Paul wanted to build. And from what I'm learning, he had that in New Orleans. I never really knew that. But it's more glaring right now with the Clippers, I think, just because they've never had any culture, any pride to speak of. So it's little things, guys. I mean, it's cheesy, but it's inviting everybody in the building to your shoe party, and it's having cupcakes for every birthday, and when Jamal Crawford has a baby, making a card and having kids. I mean, kids run around that locker room, and it'll be weird because you go to a Laker game one night and a Clipper game the next night, and the locker rooms are so entirely different, even though I don't think of Chris Paul as that bubbly kind of personality. I mean, I actually think of him as more like a Kobe personality, but I think he can flip a switch better. When he's off the court, he's one guy. When he's on the court, he's a completely different person, which kind of stands in contrast to like a Kobe or Derrick Rose or Garnett, which is more like they're one person the entire time, and it's always pretty tough.
Yeah, and Kobe, I guess, Kobe and Chris Paul's personalities are sort of well known. I'm curious what you think about the secondary personalities on the team. Blake Griffin, and I guess, would you say it's Nash or Dwight? I guess probably Dwight is the leg. How would you, it seems like Blake goes out of his way to project kind of like this big kid off the court.
Yeah.
What do you think about how those other personalities meld in?
Well, I think that the stronger personalities on that team are probably the lesser contributors. I think Blake and DeAndre are kind of going along for the ride. The people who set the tone on that team, it's Paul, Caron Butler, Billups, Odom a little bit, Jamal Crawford. So it's more of those, veteran players and some of those bench guys. And you see kind of how crazy that bench is. I think that is more like the tone for the team. Whereas you're right, with the Lakers, it's the older guys setting the tone, and it's really, to me, this kind of Nash Kobe bromance has been a fun part of the Lakers season. They've totally fallen in love with each other, and I think in part of it is bonding over their frustration with Howard. all season, whether fair or not. But you sort of get the sense that there's that Nash and Kobe, it's really worked. And, the Howard component is something that maybe has unified them in a weird and probably unfortunate for the Lakers way.
Well, you recently wrote a profile on another interesting personality, and that would be one Rajon Rondo. And what I'm wondering is there are a lot of murmurs about how he's kind of a salty guy, and you can see stories of that. You can see stories of that in your piece, but he also gave you a lot and seemed to be quite engaging with you. So um, I'm wondering what did you take from that? How did you feel about Rondo's personality after spending so much time with him?
I mean, he's one of my favorite guys I've ever interviewed because there's no fake in him at all. I mean, it's just, he is who he is, and I don't really think he's a weird guy to trade for. If you think about if the Celtics really are going to think about moving him and another team would think about getting him, I think that team would have to be in a certain market and with a certain coach. He wants to play for Doc Rivers, and that's about it. And I just don't know that you could send him to kind of a smaller market or mid-market with a demanding coach and expect anything other than a complete train wreck, because that's who he is. I mean, he goes back at coaches. He second guesses everything. Everything's a question with him. He drives a lot of people crazy. I think he's really great. I mean, I think it's part of his genius, this kind of inquisitiveness. He's really one of the coolest guys I've ever interviewed because he's so quick and he doesn't talk a lot, but when he does, he has a ton to offer. The timing of that story was horrendous. I wrote the story and then he blew out his ACL, and we were like, well, what do we do with this thing? So I'm glad they ended up running it because I think it gave a glimpse into who he is, and especially now with the way the Celtics are playing, they do have this dilemma with him because Ethan, he is, I think he only fits in certain. I hate this word culture; it always comes back to this, but he only fits in certain cultures. If he was on the Clippers, it wouldn't be what it is. He doesn't want to give out cupcakes and be around a bunch of little kids after games. It needs to be this kind of hardcore, intense culture. And so he fits perfectly with Garnett, with what the Celtics have built. I'm kind of would love to see him play with Kobe and Garnett together and just go out and kill people.
Like an intensity supernova.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
One thing I thought, and it's hard to, psychoanalyze players, but we're invited
I
to
know.
by
That's what
someone.
we're doing. Yeah.
One thing that it strikes me about watching him play sometimes is like he's playing little games within the game. Like he wants to get Ray Allen or whoever like three of this specific kind of shot in this
That's
specific
right.
kind of way. And like it's not enough for him to just beat a team. Like he has to kind of have some fun toying along with it. And is that good? Like is that good for the
No.
bottom line?
No, it's not good for the bottom line. I mean, he's almost like an artist in that way. I mean, these plays, it's interesting watching him. I only really watched him in big games like everybody else. So I had this feeling like this guy was the greatest player. I've seen him in all those national TV games, but when you watch him for a prolonged period of time against, in games that people aren't really paying attention to against lower level teams, you're right, Beckley, he toys with it. I mean, he'll have an open layup and he'll kick it out to somebody. He's almost trying to like enhance degree of difficulty. Like if every possession, if you got some extra points or something, Rondo would be perfect then. So I think he does do a lot of that because there's just a way he likes to play, and he definitely looks out for assist numbers, and he has a feeling for the way plays look. Like when you talk to him about specific plays he's made, he goes over them and as almost like an artist would talk about a painting or something. He's like, this guy's hand was here and this guy's hand was here, and I put the ball right between their hands. And I'm thinking, isn't there an easier way to get a bucket? But that's kind of the mastery of him.
Do you think that winning in that way that Toronto is fulfilling, matters more to him than winning itself?
Um, I think it's close. I think it's a good question. I think it's really close. I think part of it, even, is that I don't think he's looking at it the same way we are. I think he's thinking of it as the best way to win, because he is competitive. And I think that in major games, he kind of cuts down on some of that. Um, but it's a good question because when he's going to come back to the Celtics, they've seen now a different way to win, and they're gonna have to figure out, is he, he's two things. He's smart and he's stubborn. So is he smart enough to recognize that this is better, or is he so stubborn that he won't recognize it? And that kind of battle within himself, the smart versus the stubborn, I think will define the Celtics next season, because they have to see if they can ingratiate him back into this, and if they can't, they may have to deal him. And I'll be just so curious to see where a guy like that ends up, because I don't know. I just don't know that there's so many destinations for him.
Yeah, I would love to see. I love the note that you had from Josh Smith saying, it was like playing with Mike Vick, and I was the only one who could catch his passes. I wonder if, as pros, though, they would get along the same way. And I also wonder, does his reputation seriously depress his value to the rest of the league? Like, can the Celtics? First off, what is fair value for Rondo is like a really tough question, but do other teams look at him and be like, "Ugh, I don't know if the headache is worth it."
No doubt they do, especially with this. We see this kind of Spurs influence on the NBA and how that tree has grown in so many places. I think it would take a team, a team maybe more like the Lakers, that is willing to bend to personalities and have guys who may not fit in that Spurs Thunder box, and teams that are willing to hire coaches with the express purpose of fitting with players, instead of get players who fit under your culture and the way you want to do it. It's that former group that I think would be the ones that would be more likely to tolerate Rondo and to kind of appreciate the things he brings, because he does bring a lot. I mean, the things he does are pretty incredible. The way he plays in the playoffs, and I think guys like playing with him. I think especially the way he's fit in with the Celtics. So, and I think Smith is a good thought, Beckley, because when you have somebody with that history, for someone like that, they've already learned some of those eccentricities.
You wrote about how Rondo has trust issues because of the very troubled background that he had growing up. And obviously, it's really hard to make these assessments from the outside, but I'm wondering, do you think that with him and the trust, it's about a threshold, and once you're of the very small group of people that he can trust, it's even more so, and it's even more of a tighter bond?
I asked him about that. Ethan, I think it's when he gets burned by somebody, he feels like the trust is gone and then it's gone forever. So I think he's one of those guys who's like, if one thing kind of goes wrong, he sort of lights it all on fire. And I don't really think that's happened with the Celtics, even with the Chris Paul, trade talks and all of that got leaked. And he still is there's a lot of pride in being a Celtic and in playing with Kevin Garnett and in what Kevin Garnett's built. So, to be honest, I think that's more of like a media thing, his lack of trust, because he has a really deep feeling for his teammates there,
Yeah, no, I think his
except for Ray
relationship.
Allen,
Sorry.
you know.
Yeah, that was interesting, and I think he and Garnett. I would love to like just observe them together
Oh,
with
totally.
them not knowing that I was in the room or like a fly on the wall, and just like watch them talk and interact and talk about
I
the
know.
game.
I got to see Garnett do like a film. Like he was with all the like young players, like going over tape of it was actually about a Bucks pick and roll play, and he was just dissecting this one play. And one of the Jared Sullinger was like, he's like, you think he's screaming at you, but he's not. It's just the way he talks. Which I love that. Like even interviewing him, the way he talks to you, you like wonder if he's just gonna tear your head off. But it's just sort of his way of communication, and that's a little bit like Rondo. It's a little bit like Paul, and I think there are guys in the NBA who respond to that, and other guys who don't. I was talking to Chris Paul about it yesterday, and he said that there's players in his career who he's been with who say you can't talk to me like that. It just doesn't work for me, and I don't like hearing it. And so if you play with Rondo, Garnett, Kobe, probably you have to have a thick enough skin to deal with that stuff.
Yeah. This is great, man. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Well,
Always,
thanks, guys.
always
Thanks for having me.
a pleasure to have you by.
Thanks. Hey, Ethan, did you see LeBron's getting married in San Diego?
You said that in
Did you
such
see
a
that?
San Diego accent. Did you see the Bronx get married in San Diego? I
I
didn't I
know, but
didn't see that.
if we just had a team, we would be so well positioned.
I believe so.
It's
I think the free agents would want to come down there, and it's very unfortunate that
2015.
Sterling, he's done a lot of terrible things, and that's one of them. Taking a team from San Diego.
Exactly.
Eventually
All
it
right,
will
guys.
come.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
No, happy San Diego's finest, Lee Jenkins. Later,
See you
man.
guys. Appreciate it.
Really.
I love when Lee's San Diego accent comes out. Appreciate it, bro.
Yeah, it's great coming on anytime.
Yeah.
I just want to do the show like that.
National treasure, Lee Jenkins. All right, let's take an audience question. This one about Brandon Jennings, who has been playing well since the Reddick trade. Is Brandon Jennings post-trade assist boost for reals or just a
For
late
real.
season push for a contract? Um, I wouldn't say either. I think that I mean Jennings has been wanting this contract all season. I don't think it makes sense to think that he's more motivated now. And also assists, you need someone else to make the shot.
Yeah,
Other people have been
Monte's been
shooting
killing
better,
it.
and I think that's why he's getting more assists.
Yeah, my favorite player, Monte Ellis, has been very good. So yeah, I think that's been helping the assist quotient of one Brandon Jennings.
Yeah, Jennings, I think, is everything I've heard is that he's going to be staying in Milwaukee, that the market for him is not very strong, and that Milwaukee is probably going to pay a premium to keep him. I know he wants to get to LA, but I don't know if the Lakers would make a move to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, he hasn't proven to be a player who helps a team yet. So that would be something of a risk to cash that guy out. And yeah, I think the league is becoming maybe this is the Sloan connection, but the league has become unwise to those kinds of low efficiency, high volume shooting little guys. That's not typically the guys you win with, and Jennings might be a casualty, or his bank account might be a casualty of that sea change.
Well, I also think Jennings is in sort of a crappy position in Milwaukee where he has to take a lot of shots. Like they can't just throw it into Larry Sanders on the low block and like let him go to work. The offense is designed for him to shoot a ton. And that might not be ultimately, you don't want him shooting 17 shots, you want him shooting 11 shots. And you look at Milwaukee as a team that just inherits a guy like JJ Redick, who is a model of efficiency. Someone people really liked in Orlando. Maybe it's lit a fire under Monte, but he's playing like 15 minutes, 12 minutes some nights, and it's just not a franchise that seems to value a system that I think would bring out the best in Jennings.
Well, Larry Sanders, why don't we get more of him? If he's so good, why don't we get more of him? Is this a coaching flaw? Is this just a wrong decision? It's odd to me that he doesn't play more.
Well, he fouls a lot, right? Like, isn't that a pretty big
I
deal? I
guess
mean, he
that's
has
part of it.
5 fouls for 48, so he's hacking away. But I also think coaches have a hard time justifying playing players they don't think contribute on both ends. And
Yeah.
coaching, you could say, is really like a grand exercise in problem solving. And some coaches are more apt to take on problems like Jordan or
Uh-oh.
even Larry Sanders, where you kind of have to do some things to help them. And I have the feeling that that's kind of where Larry is like, okay, we recognize this one ability, but we're not going to, give him the Omer Ashik treatment to allow him to play on both ends.
The Omer Ashik treatment. Yeah, I guess that there are certain guys where you don't have to worry about them when you're using your whiteboard. You throw Chris Bosh out there, and he doesn't gum up the works of any offensive situation, and Larry Sanders isn't necessarily there. I mean, I know Monte's been playing well, but it's always been curious to me, though, I've wondered if it's tradition why he gets such heavy minutes, because you would almost think of him like a Larry Sanders in that he's not really going to contribute on both ends. I mean, for whatever your criticism of his offense, his defense is probably a bigger concern. So I've just never understood and wondered if it's tradition that somebody like Larry Sanders gets truncated minutes and somebody like Monte gets big minutes.
Right. Well, there are many mysteries in this universe, and to solve them all, we go to Dagger Smash.
All of them.
All right, my dagger is for the Thunder fans who were vehemently defending Serge Ibaka on Twitter. What is wrong with you? Like,
God,
it's okay to be a good person and in a moment of temporary psychosis, try to hit someone on the nuts. Like, it doesn't mean that said strike was okay, and it doesn't mean necessarily that Ibaka is like a terrible person. I've had moments, even just in pickup, like someone hits you the wrong way, you get like freaky fired up for about 15 seconds. And you know, I've never punched someone for it, but I've really gotten close. And if Ibaka does that in a moment of insanity, it's okay for him to be an asshole momentarily and still be a good person. I could not believe all the people who were like, this is Blake's fault. Like, what are you thinking?
God. Yeah, that's just crazy. That's a great rant, and also I don't guard you in pickup. I mean, there are other reasons, but I just don't want. I don't want the tornado. I don't want to poke the bear that is Beckley Mason, who might have a tantrum. Maybe you could say it's a whole metaphor for the stealing a team from Seattle, and Seattle got the nut punch, and so they feel some sort of kinship with Serge Ibaka. I think you could go a few levels deep in assessing that. I just want to expound on the Rondo stuff for my smash than we were talking about it. And I believe that you can say that he gives them a higher ceiling, and that is so. It's not as simple as makes them better versus makes them worse, but there is some denial going on right now. There is some denial. They are 13-4 with a much better margin of victory since losing Rondo, and you could come up with reasons for it, such as Avery Bradley makes them better on defense, certainly. But at a certain point, you're kind of making excuses, and when somebody's getting talked about as a top 12 player, that shouldn't be a neutral presence, and that shouldn't be a presence that's just totally outweighed by Avery Bradley coming back. Like, that's going to probably factor into the decisions they make going forward. So I'm just commenting on how this idea that everybody's doing things for themselves now, and they were dependent on Rondo, and now they're doing things for themselves, and they've learned to grow, and it's not that Rondo wasn't helping them much. It just seems like a lot of BS, and it doesn't reflect well on him, and he kind of hasn't gotten a whole lot better in the past 3 seasons, and it's an issue. So just he's a fascinating figure with a lot of talent, and I hope he gets it together and develops a three-point shot. But right now, he would seem to be, at the very least, a neutral regular season presence in that team.
Yeah, let's bring on James. I want to comment there, though, that Rondo, right, top 12 talent, but like being a top 12 player is about like a lot of BS dirty work that like he doesn't like to do during the regular season. All right, James, lay it on us. What are you noting?
My note is a sad item of news. Marcin Gortat sprained his foot and will be in a cast for the next 3 weeks. He doubts he will return this season.
There goes the Suns season. It's all over now.
God.
Promising season that was the Suns is just heartbreak in the desert.
15 seconds or less is done.
They're like the most depressing team in the NBA. They lost by 27 last night to the Raptors after having 4 days off to like sit there and prepare. And it's not as if the Raptors are lighting the world on fire. Like, it's just to watch that team is horrible. And like without Gortat, it's just,
by the way,
I don't know how much worse you can get.
That's an awesome image, though. The Raptors, actual dinosaurs, Raptors lighting the world on fire is an amazing mental image, and it entertains me far more than anything the Suns have done this season.
It's not saying that much.
Oh, James. All right. Well, with that, I say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for Lee for coming on. James,
that was great.
Take it easy, I guess. Thanks for producing.
Yeah.
Anthony Bain
you
for the
haggard.
image. Ethan, have yourself a great weekend.
Oh, I'll try. You too, man. See you guys.
Guys.
taught my bird to whistle like a referee. I can make a free throw when I'm down on one knee. I've been a fan of basketball since I was 5. Now I am a fan of HoopSpeak Live. Hilarious analysis, a mystifying trope. An angel with a cudgel breaking bubbles of soap. Like honeybees buzzing around a hive. Everybody buzzing about HoopSpeak Live.